Hi, this is Catherine, and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Taylors of Harrogate's Blackberry Raspberry Tea. Blackberry and raspberry, let's not forget the ampersand. I just like a nice, relaxing fruity tea. It's kind of like having red wine, but not. A little bit different. But this is a mug from Canada, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think this was from my grandparents when they went to Canada. I have another mug also from Canada. I think they're both from my grandparents. There was a little time period in like the 80s when they were going up to Canada on little trips. So I'm saying this because I was thinking about my grandma today and recently. I was thinking about my grandparents, I mentioned my other grandmother recently, but this is my maternal grandmother who lived out in Floral Park, Queens, which is like as east Queens you can get. It's very close to Long Island, so you're out of the city and now you're in Long Island. So Queens is a big borough, and we grew up, and I still live in Queens, but I live still in Western Queens. So, like I said, to go from one end to another could be a bit of a ride. And I used to take the F train out there to visit her. I take the F to the end and then take a bus because not a lot of Queens is actually serviced by the subways. I'm not going to even go into the infrastructure. So yeah, so I was on the F train today and, doing my civic duty. Let's not get into that either. And I just remembered all those times. I mean, sometimes we get rides, but a lot of times I go out on my own to visit my grandmother, sometimes to help her go places, and sometimes just a visit, keep her company, that sort of thing. I don't think I was a stellar granddaughter, but once in a while I did my thing. And sometimes I would go with my sisters, or one of my sisters, or both of them, or whatever. And that ride wasn't terrible because the F train, yeah, it's a little long, but once you get to the end, you switch for the bus, and if you've got something to read, it's kind of fun. I don't remember getting carsick usually in that bus, which is good. And we had an added benefit of a lot of times before we'd go, when we get off the F train, we'd get off by the station that was near the Central Library in Jamaica, Queens, and we'd load up on books. So I usually have a pretty light backpack with me, so I could do that. And grandparents, they would just see you coming with these big, heavy backpacks and just think that's what the kids today do, Yeah, back in the day when we didn't really put reserves on library books, I mean, I'm sure there was a way to do it, but I didn't know of it. And so we go there even before visiting my grandmother. Sometimes we just go there just to visit and, see a lot of books. But I mean, it was the Central Library, so even though my local libraries were good, the Central Library always had the big collection of books. And so if you were going to go that direction anyway, you might as well go up there and see what you can get. And sometimes I would spend time. I specifically remember one time looking for some Jean Plady books which I haven't really talked about her very much on this channel, surprisingly. But I think she was kind of down below, and I was looking for other books too. Her books, so I had to bend down, up and down, and I was only in my 20s at this point. But all that bending down, I remember, like, the next day, for the first time, I remember feeling serious pain in my knees. Especially my right knee, but my both knees are to this day, I have messed up knees, not chronically, but I think eventually it will be. But I remember complaining about my knee pains, and people would say, "Oh, you're so young. Why do you have knee pains?" And I'm like, "Because I do." And I know I shouldn't blame it on bending down to look for books, but let's face it, I probably should have done a better job of bending. I don't know. They say to bend at the knees, not to bend at your back, but so that's the part of the segment here where I'm going into my bookish hypochondriac, because I know I whined a lot more about my knees, and people would be like, I had a knee replacement, I had a hip replacement, I have this and I have that, and you're complaining about slightly painful knees. And you know what? When your knees hurt, it can be pretty bad. And nowadays, I have the luxury of being in my 40s, and when I complain about my knees, most people say, well, yeah, you're getting to that point. So I could get away with it. But much as I wish I could have been a little more careful I think all of us are going to have some joints in our lives that are going to give out on us, and some people it's their backs. For the most part, my back has been fine, except for my complaints about kidney stones. But let's not go there either, because that's another, discussion, which I've already done. But I was, in my estimation, those searches were worth it, because the thing about going to libraries and bookshops, but really libraries, because bookshops are great in their own way, and I'll talk about that ad nauseum on other times. But libraries, especially those big central libraries, like they have one in Manhattan too, you find books that maybe aren't as popular right now. So you may find books that came out a while back, and you just wouldn't find that elsewhere unless you just looked online nowadays. But it's not as fun, because sometimes you'll discover things in libraries that you would never have seen otherwise. And the same thing goes for new books too. Some newer books are hyped up, and you go into a bookshop, and that's the one you see all over there. You go on an Amazon page, and that's the first one you see. Everybody's talking about these certain new popular books. And there's other ones that are new, and they may be loved, and they may end up being popular, but maybe not as much as some people, as other books, They may be a little more niche, So I'm going to talk about 2 books that were discovered there at the Central Library, probably going on the way off the F train to visit my grandma. And the first one was, I was in kind of like the news section, where there'd be these tables not far from the checkout area. And I think the checkout area was there. My memory's a bit fuzzy. But I looked down one day and I saw this book, The Eyre Affair. I think it was in hardcover when I saw it. It was pretty new, by Jasper Fforde. And immediately I said, Eyre, because, Jane Eyre. And I've always been a halfway Bronte person. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. So I read the synopsis, and I'm not sure if this is the exact synopsis that I read in the hardcover, but this one says, welcome to a surreal version of Great Britain circa 1985, where time travel is routine, cloning is a reality, dodos are the resurrected pet of choice, and literature is taken very, very seriously. England is a virtual police state where an ant can get lost, literally, in a Wordsworth poem. Militant Baconians, like bacon, heckle performances of Hamlet, and forging Byronic verse is a punishable offense. All this is business as usual for Thursday next. Renowned special operative in literary detection, until someone begins kidnapping characters from works of literature. When Jane Eyre is plucked from the pages of Bronte's novel, Thursday must track down the villain and enter the novel herself to avert a heinous act of literary homicide. So, of course, I had to read this. I had to check this out right away. And, so many classic characters are in here. And I mean, if I've mentioned Pages & Co., that new series now, the Book Wanderers or something it's called. It's a similar idea, but that's maybe a younger crowd it's made for. This is for adults. It's sci-fi, fantasy, humor, and all kinds of literary references. All kinds of, if you are at all into classical or classic literature, you're gonna like this, especially British literature. There's so much. It's a series, by the way. So this is the first one of the Thursday Next series, and it just goes in further. Every book, you get introduced to more characters. You get Miss Havisham is a big one. There's the Sense Sensibility is mentioned. I don't want to give away all kinds of spoilers, but if you like the classics, you should really read this. I know people who don't like these books, but I absolutely love them. I think they're hilarious. He has other books I like too. The Nursery Crimes, there's 2 books I think in that series. Not really series if there's 2, right? It's kind of like people who are investigating, nursery rhyme characters and crimes. Basically kind of similar to this, but with nursery rhymes. And that was hilarious as well. There's a few other things he's written that I quite like, but I think Thursday Next series is my very favorite and always will be. So, it hasn't written a new one in a number of years, but I still say, guys, look for this, and let me know what you think. So the other one, one time I was in the Central Library with my sister, Bonnie, and she came up to me and she said, "I think you'll like this book." I wonder why. And yeah, so London the Novel by Edward Rutherfurd. And this is historical novels. Well, this is a historical novel about London. So it starts out, I think, around like Celtic London times, pre-Roman, and follows families. You know, there'll be like the Celtic family and then a Roman family, and later on Saxon families come along, Normans, you know, and there's a number of families that sort of coexist. They don't know this, obviously, over the centuries, but like they somehow coexist throughout the history together. And sometimes one of them is a particularly not nice person, you know, and some of them are the ones you root for, but you follow them all throughout. I think it follows up to the Blitz. I think it ends at the Blitz. So it's like the 40s. So it's fantastic if you like history, if you love London. I mean, my least favorite part was during the plague, but obviously, but fantastic. And he has gone on to write so many books. I don't know if this is his first one. There's a few other ones that might be before London. I'm not sure. There's one called Sarum, which is an England one. The Forest, which you might see. I think I moved it. Yeah, but I used to have it in my background over here, which is about the New Forest, also in England. They've had 2 in Ireland, one in Russia. I wasn't crazy about the one in Russia, for my own reasons. There's one about Paris. Oh, and one about New York, which was well done, actually. You know, I thought, oh, would I really want to read something from this British guy, I think, about New York? Is that like, you know, but I mean, you know, this is a Canada mug and it's made in England. I read the bottom. Made in England. Very odd. So sometimes you don't know where something comes from and it ends up being really good. So, you know, give that a try as well. But definitely, if you like London, try London. And I thought I'd mention this again because there's a few things I'm looking forward to coming out this year, like the third of the Wolf Hall Thomas Cromwell, you know, trilogy. But I found out when I was looking up this author, I think he's coming out with one about China. And I think it's also March. I could be wrong, but I think it's also March. So now I have something else. Like, I have enough books to read, but something else that I kind of want to read. And I'm thinking that might be one of my library books of the year because it's kind of a tradition for me to check out his books in the library and sometimes end up purchasing them. But definitely, you know, I found it first in a library, and I kind of just have that tradition. So yes, I do have to deal with creaky knees. I do have to deal with, you know, the whininess that comes with it. And, you know, I've had to kind of wear shoes that were a little more supportive as a result. And I still have to be careful sometimes. Like when I was in Texas and I went with my sister to a bookshop, and I kept looking down to the lower shelves and I'd get stuck down there for a minute because my knees were hurting. But again, some things are just worth the pain. And I hope, you know, that you've enjoyed my little voyage of discovery in the past. And if you guys have ever discovered something amazing at a library, let me know down below in your comments, because I think it's one of the most amazing things. I know I am making a goal to read my own books that I own for the most part because I have to. But over the years, honestly, the library has been such a friend to me. Being able to take out books that I could never afford at the time, and usually even now, because new books are still overpriced, you know, like a lot of these books when they come out, they're like in the 20s, you know, and if I read a bunch of new books in 1 year, I couldn't afford it, you know. So it's a brilliant thing to have access to libraries. And now, of course, we can put things on hold, but sometimes it really is nice just to go to a beautiful library. And I will talk about other libraries in the future that I've loved, but it's been a long time since I've been to the Central Library. I don't remember the last time I went to the Central Library. I almost think before my grandmother died, and she died 13 years ago almost. 14 years ago almost. OMG. So it's been a while, and you know, I was like really close to the train station. I was only a couple of stops away today, and I came really close to like just going that way and looking, and then I remembered that I'm not supposed to be taking out a billion library books, and I would end up doing that. So I had to have self-control, but maybe I'll be back. So for now, this is Catherine in all her books. Taking tea with Catherine. Have a lovely book-filled day.